Ijeoma Oluo is a writer, speaker, and internet yeller. She is the author of the number one New York Times bestseller, So You Want to Talk About Race, Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America, and most recently, the national bestseller, Be a Revolution, How Everyday People Are Fighting Oppression and Changing the World, and How You Can Too. Her work on race has been featured in The Guardian, The New York Times, and The Washington Post, among many other publications. She was named to the 2021 Time 100 Next list and has twice been named to the Root 100. She received the 2018 Feminist Humanist Award and the 2020 Harvard Humanist of the Year Award from the American Humanist Association. Please help me welcome Ijeoma Oluo.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming. You were mentioning backstage that you are sort of mid-continent for the moment, but headed.
I'm headed to New York. My youngest is auditioning for music college. I have a jazz musician, so I was packing for two very different climates in this same suitcase, coming from Seattle here and then to a blizzard. So I looked a little ridiculous in my winter coat, but
you look right here, and thank you for being here. So the Banned Books Festival, and we were talking a little bit, about the choice to choose a nonfiction book, and so you want to talk about race, is a banned book. What did you think when you first found out that you had written a book that someone wanted to ban?
I mean, I knew people wanted to ban it before it was banned because my email box told me that. But you definitely know you're in good company. When people are afraid of a book or afraid of true stories, it reaffirms the power of that story. Of course, I want people to read my books. I do not actually want my books to be banned because I want my information to be out there. But I do comfort myself in knowing that most of the authors that I wear on my arms have been banned in various spaces. And part of the work that we are all trying to do is say the true thing, whether that's nonfiction, fiction, plays, music, regardless of what the powers that be want us to say.
So why, kind of following on that, why do you think these stories, and especially in the context of So You Want to Talk About Race, why do you think race is so hard for people to talk about?
I think it's made hard on purpose. I don't think it's naturally hard. I don't think it's naturally hard to have conversations with people you love and share your truth and have accountability for the way that we treat people. I think it's made hard on purpose so that we don't do that. Because if we were able to have these difficult conversations around race, if we were able to share experience and find commonality, then we could actually come together and address the ways in which we're all being harmed by systems of oppression. And so I think part of it's always by design. When we look at, I always tell people when I'm giving lectures, I'll say, when you're watching a movie and there's a racist character, how do you know the character is racist? And they'll say, well, it's the one shouting the N-word, or the one with a Nazi symbol. It's made to be that cut and dry so that when we talk about everyday racism, that's the only imagery that happens. And so then people who don't want to have the conversations can say, oh, she said that was racist, she called you a Nazi. Oh, she said that was racist, she called you a Klan member. And we don't get to have real conversations about how we're all socialized to participate in racist systems. And so I want people to understand that, that our relationships are actually made better by talking about these things. Our understanding of the world, our understanding of politics, our understanding of our own power is all made better, and all of that is made easier when we have these conversations. But when we live in a country where the government is literally trying to make these conversations illegal, and I'm not being facetious in that, they're doing that because they don't want you to know that.
Yeah, one of the points you make in the book, right, is that racism and racial oppression are so big that it feels impossible to sort of touch it. And one of the things that we talked about a little bit when we first talked was, that is not only by design, but it has an incredible legacy. And so I guess how did we get to this moment?
Yeah, I mean, when we think about the birth of this country, we're talking about something birthed in incredibly violent racism in the form of enslavement and genocide, and then built further by indentured servitude and the violent exploitation of workers, by the mass displacement of peoples. And it's been cemented through the largest prison system in the world, through the largest, most violent global military in the world. All of that is built into every system we have. And so the way in which we live in the world and see the world is through that lens. There is nothing that isn't about race. Absolutely nothing. And I wish it was. It's exhausting. But instead of that being simply overwhelming, you can also look at that as opportunity. Because instead of saying, I have to wait till we have someone else in the White House before we fix this, or I have to wait until, we hear that old adage, until these generation dies off, as if we don't have violently racist high schoolers and college students right now. Instead of that, you can say, everything I do offers opportunity to make real change. And we know that that's real because we see the way in which that real, on the ground, everyday change that you make in your communities with your neighbors is being demonized. We're seeing this is why ethnic studies programs are being gotten rid of. This is why DEI is being gotten rid of, right? This is why my book is banned. This is why the books of so many other Black authors, queer authors, disabled authors, trans authors are all being banned. This is all because they understand the power of it. And they understand what it means when you spend time with someone with a different lived experience with you and you hear them and you find a way to make change together. They understand that you start from the ground up and the whole power system wants you to believe it's top down. And it's not. They know that. The people at the top absolutely know that this is a ground up power system, and they're trying to convince us it's top down. And that's why we have armies rolling through one city at a time, trying to stop us from finding local collective power. And so it's just vital that we understand that instead of letting it overwhelm you, let it encourage you to know that everything you do in the space you're at has real power to make change.
Yeah. And I think actually you talking about it, yes, yes. One of the things that I, as you were speaking through that, kind of connected in my head is that this book is actually, it is a great book, but the chapters, there's 17 of them. These are 17 little ways to start doing exactly what you're talking about. So it doesn't have to be solve like the character on stage, right? Tell me racism. Just explain it to me. Here's a moment where we can say, this is one thing I can commit to say, I am going to work to not do that thing, or I'm going to work to do this thing. And I think that's really valuable, and that's one of the great things about this book. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
One of the things in this book that you allude to a lot, that is an especially insidious part of white supremacy, is gaslighting and how damaging that can be over a life. How do you respond to those situations when they happen to you?
Various ways. And in fact, one thing I think is so important for me as a Black woman is to try to spend a regular amount of time with other Black people, especially Black women, so that I can level set and remind myself I'm supposed to feel this comfortable in the space I'm in. I'm supposed to feel this safe in the space I'm in. I'm supposed to feel this seen and this loved in every space I'm in. And that helps combat the gaslighting for me when I go out in the world. It may not change the rest of the world, But the amount of harm done to us by being told that we're crazy, that we're complaining over nothing, that we're spoiled, that we can't, let go, um, absolutely compounds the trauma of living with racism. And so the least I can do for myself is spend time in a space where I get a reminder of the way that I'm supposed to be able to live, that we're all supposed to be able to live. And then I also just make decisions for myself and my well being in the moment. And so I think it's really important to know people of color, especially Black people in this country, face so many acts of racism, these small and large violences against our person. How we respond to each one of those is going to depend on what we need in the moment. And so part of also how I counter that gaslighting is knowing that if I serve what I need in that moment, I'm doing the right thing. Mm. And so some days that means speaking up, some days that means having an argument, some days that means eating my lunch. If it keeps me going and it helps me care for myself, which is an act of my own dignity, it helps me care for my community, then it's the right thing to do. And that absolutely helps. And then just staying informed, asking myself, where am I hearing these things about myself? It gets to us, right? The messaging that this isn't supposed to bother us, it sinks in. But I learned something really interesting. There were so many things every day before I started writing full time. And I worked in corporate jobs, and I worked in majority white spaces because I live in Seattle. There's so many things that I thought I had to ignore to get through my day. And what I didn't realize is when you cut yourself off to the pain of life, you cut yourself off to the joy of life. You can't have one without the other. Like, you can't appreciate one without the other. And so the thing that surprised me when I started this work and started making it what I did all of the time and started speaking honestly was how much of myself I was able to be in touch with, how much I would cry. I would cry at every hard thing that happened because I was hurt, because my people were hurt, and that's an appropriate response. And I cried with joy at every amazing thing that happened. And I cried with laughter at every hilarious thing that happened. And I never had that large a range of emotion in my life until I let the full reality of my existence as a Black woman in this world hit me. I want us to know that won't kill us. There are so many ways to die in this world. And one of the ways is to cut you off from your own life while you're alive. So opening up to the fear, to the heartbreak, to the outrage that we need to feel for our own people is vital for us to be open to the joy, the laughter, and the love that we have for our people as well.
Yes. Think, please. Yes. One of my questions, kind of more towards the end, but we're here, so let's go with it. Is how do you find joy? What do you do with this hard work, right? And then you got to go home and find your joy. How do you find joy?
I've said before, I'm blessed by the amazing, beautiful narcissism of teenagers. My kids do not care, and my teenager's graduating, my youngest. So I'm gonna have to find something else real soon. My therapist and I are talking about this. But they don't care what you're working on. They want to know where the stacks are. They want to tell you the thing they want to tell you. They want to show you a thing. And it pulls me into the now regularly. Allowing myself to be pulled into the now by the people I love and the people who love me is vital. I'm blessed to be married to a Black person who understands that as well and does similar work. He's a musician and an activist, and he will remind me. And I have to remind myself this because I tell other people enough that if I don't remind myself, I'm a hypocrite. Um, I do not exist in service of white supremacy. I don't exist to even better white supremacy. And if my work has me spending more time in white supremacy than in my own community and with my own people,
Mm.
white supremacy is winning.
Mm.
And I deserve more. White supremacy doesn't get the best of me. So for my work that I do, I have like a 2/3 rule. I have to be spending 2/3 of my time in community, uplifting, protecting community, and a third of my time fighting white supremacy in white supremacist spaces, in the, in education spaces. All of it fights white supremacy, affirming our right to exist and be in community and care for ourselves. But whiteness has a lot of work to do to dismantle the harm that it's done, that it does to others, and it does to itself. No one will take care of us but us. And so that's part of how I keep going, is remembering that that's actually a crucial part of the job. And then remembering that when I'm stressed and burnout and moving from a place of trauma instead of a place of love, my work suffers.
Mm.
My work is not good because I am not using my higher thinking. I am using that animalistic survival instinct. And I'm not thinking collaboratively. I'm not thinking about future possibilities. I am narrowing my idea of survival down to this small animalistic thing instead of a collective, multi generational thing. And so, for the betterment of my work, even if I can't sometimes be convinced to do it for myself, for the betterment of my work, balance, time, and having a community willing to tell me when I'm out of balance and tell me when I need to come back into community and come back to rest, is how I keep going.
Yeah, there's something about being with the when you're talking about community, right? And being called out sometimes gently, sometimes less so, about how you need to come back into balance, or in the case of as listed, mentioned in the book, when you get it wrong, right? Which I think is a thing that is terrifying to a lot of people. And you mentioned that in the book, but I think it's important to be open to wrong, right? Um, and yeah, what are your? I mean, I guess maybe what are your thoughts on being wrong and being okay with that?
It's vital. I mean, first of all, if I wasn't open to being wrong and acknowledging that you can be a person who loves and cares and wants to do great things and also be wrong, I would be a really bad writer. Because my job is not to preach to the choir. My job is not to act like everyone comes out knowing everything from birth. My job is to acknowledge that we're all conditioned by a society that is telling us a lot of awful things about people and about ourselves, and that we can grow and change from that. And if I can't live that, I can't write that, my work is of no use. But also, it's part of being human. We are not exempt from the world around us. We all came up in white supremacist, ableist, sexist, capitalist societies and education systems, and no one came out of that unscathed. And all of us are a part of the oppression of someone else, some to greater degrees than others. And the same way in which I want someone to hear me when I tell them about how they're participating in harm against me, I have to be willing to hear others. But I also always think of it as an opportunity. My biggest fear is going through the world causing harm and never being made aware, because I can't do anything with that. Being made aware is an act of love. And we know this no matter how it comes to us, because we've all interacted with people who were on some shit and we decided they're not worth it, right? And we walked on and said there's no helping them. So when you make the decision, you say, I'm going to have this conversation, I'm going to say this thing, even if you're saying it in anger, you're saying it, you don't want to waste your own time. Part of why you're saying it is because you think there's a chance it will be heard. And so accepting that accepting that someone has at least a little bit of faith in you to grow and change is really, really important. So I'm always thankful. No matter what form that education comes in, I'm thankful because someone believes I can grow and change, and they're giving me the opportunity to stop doing the harm I was doing. And I love that. I don't have a perfect vision of liberation. I can't. I'm conditioned by this world. But I get closer every day that I find out what parts of the path I'm on aren't right.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that resonated the most with me in the book and from my own history was really understanding intersectionality, right? The way that our different identities sort of stack up and go together, and how that can be challenging um, to understand your own bias, right, without sort of walking into that and asking that question. Um, so, how on the topic of intersectionality, how does that how does that address, how do you find that framing helps you write better?
Um, Intersectionality is one of the fundamental tenets of my work in my life. And I will be forever grateful for Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw and the work that she's done around this, and the work that she continues to do around this. Um, but I think it's important to know that for intersectionality, first and foremost, is functional. So Dr. Crenshaw did not, put this forward as a thing to help you win internet arguments, right? She was looking at the functionality of multiple levels of oppression and the harm that it was doing, particularly to Black and Brown women, right? So she was looking at interventions that were supposed to be helping women that were harming Black and Brown women because they were not considering the intersections of oppression in their lives. And so you're supposed to do something with intersectionality. And so for me, in my work as a writer, I do something with it. It's not just gotcha, you're not being intersectional. It's functional to how I do my work. And so when I'm researching, I'm not assuming that no matter what degrees I have, no matter how many books I sell, I am never assuming that I know everything. I'm assuming, looking at my intersectionality, looking at the intersectionality that other people carry into the room, that there's a lot I don't know, and that I have to seek other people out. I'm understanding that I actually shouldn't write on everything, that there are particular things where it's not my space, not my place. And it helps reduce the harm. It helps reduce the harm in my work. It makes it more widely applicable. And it makes the solutions that we try to put forward ones that don't have to be undone at a later stage. And so, as a writer, it also helps me learn more about all of the aspects of myself. It helps me integrate all of the parts of myself that move through the world as a Black, queer, neurodivergent woman. I get to be all of that in my work, and I get to see all of the people that I work with and write about. And it's been beautiful, like I say, not only for my work, but for my life.
Yeah, that as you sort of have changed, as we learn, as we grow, as those things become clear to us. um, I'm curious how the book, your relationship with the book itself, how that has grown and changed, and what it has shown you over the, this was 2018, right?
Yeah.
So 8 years. How has your relationship with it changed?
Oh, I mean, I love the book. I do. I'm very proud of it. I love to view my books, my work, as a snapshot in time. I think as a writer, if you think that it has to be the perfect end all be all forever, you're never going to write. You'll be too terrified of making it perfect. Um, I have evolved politically, and I've written about that and talked about that over the years. I love particular chapters of the book so much, and I think have stood up really well for the impact that they've made on people.
Which
I
one?
am,
Which one?
oh my gosh, so the chapters I hear the most about, the model minority myth, to this
Mm.
day, I get emails from people of the Asian diaspora from all over the country saying it's one of the only mainstream books they found that includes them. in the topic of race in America. Um, and actually, just the other day, someone was using an analogy from my book about microaggressions and talking about how it completely changed the way they talk about microaggressions in their life. Um, so much of it, like, I am very, very proud of when I hear people, in the conversations they're having around it, and the way it's helping them in their workspaces. I am much more abolitionist than I had words for at the time. I think I know I used reform as a thing in talking about police, and that is not a word that I would use today. I think I knew that in my heart. I knew it couldn't be reformed, but in the space and time I was writing, it was a conversation that people in the mainstream weren't having. I believe it should not exist. So that chapter would look a lot different.
Yeah.
And in fact, as we were talking about theories and things that could be reforms, I think the years have shown that so many of these things that we pushed for that were reforms have now become tools of the state. When we look at things like body cameras that we pushed for, they're now being used for surveillance without a warrant against our people. And now we're seeing ICE agents using it to identify, target, and murder protesters and observers. And so I understand now more fully than ever that punishment culture doesn't work.
Yeah.
That true freedom means an abolishment of all of these systems that were built in the image of slavery. And our entire prison system is part of that. And so that's definitely one where I would absolutely not even change it, because I do believe it's an accurate, it lives in its time. But if I were to re-release today, there would be an addendum that would state that. But I've also written in subsequent books quite clearly how I feel about that.
Yeah. We are almost out of time, but I did want to ask one last question. The last chapter of the book is called "Talking is Great, but What Else Can I Do?" So, not to give us too many spoilers, but what can we do? Action. That was the word.
There's a lot we can do, and in fact, I actually don't love the title of the book. It was a working title, and I had never written a book before, and I didn't know that if you write the thing up there, that oftentimes just ends up being the name of the book.
Yep.
Because I don't actually love talking about race. It's exhausting. Black people having this conversation, we're the ones that end up paying 9 times out of 10 for these conversations. We have to. I would rather do things about racism. And so luckily, that part's actually, there's a lot we can do. And so what I tell people first and foremost is find your special interest or find your place of power and start there. You don't have to tackle everything. You don't have to be on the front line of everything. A lot of times we act like the only thing you can do is start a protest and march in the street. And there is so much to be said for the power of protests like that. But if you're a teacher, your classroom is probably the most powerful place that you will ever be in. The work you do in there matters. If you have an office space, what you do in that office space matters. If you have kids, the conversations you're having with your kids matters. The conversations you're having with other parents matters. If you are an artist, the conversation you're having in art spaces, racial disparity exists in every field, in every space in this country. Thank you. And so you best serve the cause by looking at the space you know best. Mm-hmm. And then you start asking what's happening here. If you are a Black person, you can look at your experience and then look at other racialized people and look at their experience, find commonalities and find difference and appreciate that and come together and start to find ways to get heard. And a lot of times what I tell, especially racialized people in spaces, if you're looking at your particular interest, is dream a little and say, If this space was truly built for me, what would it look like? From the ground up. And then start asking, what's in the way of that? And start picking one of those things and targeting it. If you're a white person, find the space that you specialize in and find your piece of power in it, and then find the people impacted by the way things are. Listen to what they've already said before asking new questions. And then start asking them, what would you like to see here? Where can I be of service? And put yourself in that service in a way that is always accountable to those most impacted. But just find that one piece. Find that one piece and do. If everyone found their one piece, it would make such huge change. And you will see results from it faster. You will feel encouraged every day. And it will lead to more and more work, more and more change. And then when you look in the mirror, you'll be closer to the person that you actually want to be. And you won't be afraid of your own reflection anymore. You will be proud because you know what direction you're moving in life.
And that's that on that.